Okay, can everyone hear me? I've got some awesome background music, so hopefully everyone understands me during this presentation. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Justine, for the awesome introduction. Today I'm going to talk about my current master's research. So by no means yet have I completed this. So this is really a preliminary, what I've been doing in the past year. So as everyone probably knows, the Arctic is warming at more than twice the global average. And this is spurring pronounced changes in the Arctic ecosystem, including widespread declines in top terrestrial Arctic predators. So these declines are most likely climate caused due to damping of lemming cycles, sea ice decline, and the expansion of temperate species. So, lemmings are consumed by almost all Arctic terrestrial predators and play a really important role in the Arctic. So, lemming populations cycle from high abundances to low abundances in 3 to 4 year periods. And because there's so few prey species available on the tundra, this elicits density-dependent predator population cycles in response. So, for example, if you look at Arctic fox population dynamics, we see that rodent density is a huge influencer of dense accessory reproductive output. So when lemming abundance is high, Arctic foxes can have a ton of pups at one time. I think in Canada the average is about 10 pups per litter, and Arctic foxes actually have the largest litter in all of the order Carnivora. But when we have low lemming abundance or low rodent abundance, Arctic foxes may actually skip reproduction altogether, or many of their pups will die because there's not enough food on the tundra. And so this causes population cycles in Arctic foxes as well, with each of these peaks related to a small mammal abundance peak. However, lemming population cycles are damping throughout their Arctic range. So lemmings remain active throughout the winter, and winter is actually an important breeding time for them as well. So lemmings will live in the subnivean layer, which is underneath the snowpack right next to the ground. And so the snowpack actually insulates this layer, keeping it warm enough for lemmings to survive. But with warmer winters, we're seeing declines in snowpack quality, duration, and depth. So this has impacted lemming peak abundances. And because there's so few alternative prey species, it may also impact predator diet and population cycles. So in winters where there are low lemming abundances, species such as Arctic foxes may use alternative resources. So in the winter, when the sea ice freezes, Arctic foxes can actually go out and hunt bring seal pups and scavenge polar bear kills. Polar bears are blubber specialists or fat specialists, so when they kill a seal, they'll usually consume all of the outer blubber but leave the seal carcass. So that's a huge resource for an Arctic fox. And so if we have a fat, happy polar bear, we have a fat, happy fox. So if we use polar bear body mass as a proxy for abundance of marine resources, and the number of harvested Arctic foxes as a proxy of population, you can actually see that with abundance of marine resources, it causes a numerical response in Arctic foxes, causing an increase in the population. However, sea ice is declining. So if we compare the number of ice-free period days, or days when Arctic foxes can't access these marine resources, to the number of harvested Arctic foxes, again, a proxy of population, we see that there's actually a decline, and that sea ice declines are impacting Arctic fox populations. Additionally, there are expansion of temperate species in the Arctic. So, for example, red foxes, which were previously limited in their northern range by winter temperatures. So winters are terrible in the Arctic. Now, as winters are warming, we're expecting to see an increase in density of red foxes. And so red fox expansion may have important repercussions on Arctic foxes. So red foxes are a larger species, and they tend to dominate direct encounters with Arctic foxes. So we have a few photos of the two species meeting. And this is known as interference competition. But then, because Arctic foxes and red foxes are similar species ecologically, we can also assume that they use similar similar resources, such as dens for reproduction and prey species. And so we don't really know what red foxes are consuming out on the tundra, but we do know that in other areas where red foxes have moved onto the tundra, it's actually caused declines in Arctic fox populations. So I'll be studying these sorts of things in Churchill, Manitoba, in the area in and around Goulden National Park. So this is located on the western edge of the Hudson Bay, and it's a really cool area because you have boreal forest, you have tundra, and you have marine resources. And so in the Churchill area, we are seeing damping of lemming cycles. So we went from 63 lemmings per hectare in 1967 to 12 lemmings per hectare in 1994, and most recently peak years have only been at 2 lemmings per hectare in 2017. So that's a drastic decrease in the abundance of lemmings. Additionally, the Hudson Bay sea ice is declining. So if we look at the day of year in which sea ice breakup occurs and the day of year in which sea ice freeze-up occurs, we can see that there's actually a shorter duration of sea ice, which limits foxes in whether or not they can go out onto the sea ice and consume these important marine resources. Additionally, red foxes, which used to den in mainly the forest area in the Churchill area, they've actually increased their occupancy of tundra dens. So we can see the proportion of occupied tundra dens used by red foxes has increased over the past years. So Arctic foxes are important for varying species. And so if we look at harvest data, it actually shows a long-term decline in the number of Arctic foxes in this area. However, a large proportion of harvested foxes are actually juveniles. And so we know that Arctic fox harvest and den success have this nice linear relationship. So we know that fox harvest is actually tied to reproductive success. And while it is interesting looking at the harvest records, we really need to confirm this population trend by using methods that include all demographics of foxes. So for instance, the foxes out on the tundra, and model more population parameters to see what's actually happening in this area. So my objectives for my master's research are to reconstruct Arctic and red fox winter diet over multiple years of varying prey availability, to evaluate Arctic and red fox winter dietary overlap. So in the winter, there's a lot fewer prey species around, and since there are not that many species around, we expect Arctic foxes and red foxes to compete for those species if they are actually in competition. So we expect this to be the highest degree of competition for prey. And then additionally, I'll characterize Arctic fox population trends in the Churchill area. And I'll be doing this using non-invasive molecular methods. Skip a slide. Okay, so this is a map of my study area. Hopefully everyone can see it. So each of these purple dots is a fox den. So all of the fox dens I'm using are located along the coast of the Hudson Bay on the tundra. There's 115 fox dens, and then this green region is Goulden National Park. So in April annually, we go out to each fox den, we evaluate whether or not it's occupied, and collect fecal samples. So this is what an occupied fox den looks like. You can see the little fecal samples. And here's me collecting samples for my glorious research. And so a quick run through of what I do for my methods. I take a beautiful fecal sample, I subsample it, and then I extract the DNA. And so some of the advantages of using fecal DNA is that it's a non-invasive method, which is great. But one of the problems is the ideal way to collect fecal material for DNA extraction is you essentially want to collect it as it's falling before it touches the ground, which, as you guys probably understand, is impossible. But the fecal DNA is really hard to work with, especially because the DNA starts degrading very quickly, and it can become easily contaminated. So if a fecal sample touches the ground where there's dirt or other environmental contaminants, it can become contaminated. But by focusing on winter diet, we collect fecal samples from the top of the snow, which minimizes contamination. And then fecal samples also remain frozen until DNA extraction, which is awesome because it reduces the amount of DNA degradation. And so the DNA I extract from feces will reflect the DNA majorly from the individual that deposited it, so a red or Arctic fox. And then we'll also have prey DNA, so any prey items consumed in the past 24 to 48 hours prior to defecation. So the first step in my methods is to identify whether or not a fecal sample originated from a red or an Arctic fox. Because Arctic foxes and red foxes occur sympatrically on the tundra, and their fecal material looks very similar, we use a species-specific PCR to amplify a region of DNA that will tell us if it's Arctic fox or red fox. Additionally, this step allows us to discard contaminated and low-quality samples. So to do this, I amplify two different regions. There are two different lengths. So here we have, these are all fecal samples, and then here we have an Arctic fox control sample. This is Arctic fox tissue. We have a red fox tissue sample, and you can see this is a gel that we use it to amplify and to visualize DNA. And so anything that comes in line with this sample is a red fox sample. Anything in line with this sample is an Arctic fox sample. So you can see we only really have Arctic fox samples here. But additionally, if there are samples that don't amplify any DNA, if we've tested them twice, we don't include them in further analysis because they won't tell us anything. And so I extracted DNA from 959 samples. This is over an 8-year period from 115 different dens. This is a graph of what I've found. So we had a lot greater success than anticipated. Most fecal DNA studies have a success rate of anywhere from 30 to 60% success, just because fecal DNA degrades so quickly. But we've had an almost 85% success rate just due to the fact that the fecal samples are frozen. However, we have 799 Arctic fox samples and only 17 red fox samples. So we knew we were going to have a huge difference in the number, mostly because previous studies have demonstrated red foxes are less likely to defecate on their dens than Arctic foxes. But 17 is a pretty low sample, so I'll have to deal with that later in my analysis. But that's a few months down the road. And so the next step is to do a diet analysis. So here I'm trying to identify the prey species in each fecal sample. And so to do that, I'm again going to use PCR and amplify a specific region in the genome. So I'll use a universal primer. And so what a universal primer does is it binds to many different species. So I made a list of all the potential prey species in the Arctic and found a primer that binds to all of them and amplifies a region in the genome that's variable enough that you can tell each species apart. And then I also had to design a blocking primer because, like I said earlier, the majority of DNA from a fecal sample is going to be that of the predator. So here I designed a primer that will essentially bind to Arctic fox and red fox DNA and keep it from amplifying in this area. And that way we're getting a larger proportion of prey samples than we would if we didn't do that. And so once I've done that, I will send my samples off for metabarcoding and sequencing. And so some of the analyses I'll do once I have this data is compare it to annual prey abundance. And so we have long-term lemming tracking data, so we'll be able to compare what prey was consumed in what year and compare it to whether or not lemmings are at high or low abundances, and additionally compare it to sea ice duration, which again is a proxy for abundance of marine resources. And thus far, I do not have much data, but on Monday I'll actually be sending off 760 samples for sequencing and analysis. So hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks I'll have data to analyze. It's very exciting. I spent a lot of time with fecal samples in the lab. And so the next step in my project is identifying individual foxes from the fecal samples, because we want to do a population estimate, so we need to know how many individuals there are. And so here I'll be using microsatellites, which are just regions in the genome where you have these repeats. So for example, let's consider this a microsatellite. And you have AC repeated 13 times here, 16 times here, and 20 times here. So each of these is a different variation of that microsatellite. And based on that, you can identify individuals. So I'll be using 17 different microsatellites, and each one has a different number of alleles. So in that way, I'll be able to identify individuals. And I'm still working on optimizing these protocols. It's very difficult to work with fecal samples because even though we collected them from the top of the snow frozen, DNA is still degraded. So hopefully I'll have that data soon too. And so once I have that data, we will keep capture histories for each individual box identified. And we'll be able to do a molecular barcode capture and estimate parameters such as abundance, recruitment, and survival of foxes. Additionally, I'll be able to model survival probabilities associated with sample locations, such as the dens that we picked, and investigate movement patterns within and between years. I also may be able to recreate individual diet. So Arctic foxes are facing a future where their two main prey resources, especially in the winter, are declining. And there's not really alternative prey out there, so we don't know how Arctic foxes are going to respond to this. Additionally, with red foxes expanding onto the tundra, they may impact Arctic fox diet and population dynamics. We don't really know how Arctic predators are going to respond to all these things. So my research may identify changing food web interactions, provide management information if Arctic fox populations are indeed declining. And then, even though it has a lot of ecological implications, Arctic foxes are important fur-bearing species. And so if they are indeed declining, this may impact the economics of northern human communities as well. We'll get there. And with that, I would like to thank everyone who's assisted me thus far, and my funding sources, more specifically the Wildlife Society of Manitoba chapter. And then if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yes?
So, looking at your fecal analysis, it looked like about 2% of the samples are from red fox. Is that about what the population of red fox is here versus Arctic fox?
So it could be, but it's probably unlikely. So other previous research has shown that Arctic foxes, they'll defecate on their dens, they poop where they eat essentially. And so they have a lot of parasites. Whereas red foxes don't poop on their dens, and we think it's an anti-parasitic approach. And so when we go to fox dens, we collect a variety of samples from the dens. So if we go to a red fox den, there's only one fecal sample, we'll take one fecal sample. But if we go to an Arctic fox den that has 25, they take 4. And so it's probably disproportions in our sampling just because there aren't red fox fecal samples on the dens. And so in the future, we're actually going to start collecting fecal samples that look like fox wherever we find them and report them on the GPS. So it's probably more a problem with our sampling than not the number of foxes that we're talking about. Yes, here. Thank you.
Do you know if Arctic foxes face the risk of hybridization with red foxes?
That is a good question. I do not know. I could answer, but I have no idea.
That's fair enough.
With your, I tried to, sure. I was just curious, with your small number of red foxes that you have on the landscape in that area, you're using mark recapture to try to understand abundance. How confident are you that you're capturing the majority of the animals within that zone that you've been sampling? Because you could have a bit of a bias, I would think, in your collection process where all of your sample is coming from a zone that's within I don't know what it is, we'll say 15 kilometers at the coast, or 20 kilometers, whatever it is, right? So how do you account for that in your estimate of abundance when you're looking at market capture?
So these are all, but so we're not going to estimate red fox population abundance. It's really just for the diet stuff. I'm focusing on Arctic foxes. And so all those dens I showed you, those dens have been around for 100 years and we're, some, not all. But, so we're pretty confident that we know where all of the fox dens are along the coast. And so in that region, that's where the tundra is. So the tree line starts right about where those fox dens end. So we're pretty confident we're getting all of the Arctic foxes in that region by sampling those dens. Especially because right before we go out there and collect the samples, that's when Arctic foxes will come back and start settling down and choosing dens to start reproducing. So it's something I'll definitely deal with later on. But
your current population, your Arctic fox population, are they considered healthy right now? Or is it like a time that you think when they might be in danger?
So I don't think there's any current information about the population of foxes in this area and how they're doing. So we just have the Arctic fox harvest data that indicates a long-term decline, but kind of like what I said, it doesn't include all the foxes out there. It mainly focuses on juveniles. So we really don't know at this point. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing a population estimate, is to find out what's going on out in the tundra. But I'll let you know when I'm done. In hopefully a year.
I'll meet the pieces.
Okay. Any other questions?
Dean, so is harvest data biased on pelt value in a given year or a period of years? Harvest data. So you're using harvest data for Arctic fox, but is it biased given pelt value in a given year?
So the figure I showed was from one of Jim's past grad students, but I believe she accounted for like number of trappers per year, the value of the pelts, that kind of thing. And then we also know that, are you talking about juveniles or just accounting for cost of pelt and number of trappers? That's good. I was going to say we buy the carcasses from the trappers, so we also deal with a lot of dead foxes. So that's one of the reasons we know that the harvest is so biased towards young foxes, is because Chloe here ages them all.